Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I'm Patrick the Clown.
And Patrick, this week we are reviewing the new film, the highly anticipated film, based on, I've said on the show before, one of my all-time favorite book series, Clown in a Cornfield.
Yes, Damon, Clown in a Cornfield, released in May of 2025, starring the likes of Io Solanke as Tucker, Verity Marks as Ronnie, Cassandra Potenza as Janet, Will Sasso as Sheriff Dunn, Kevin Durand as Arthur Hill, Vincent Mueller as Rust, Carson McCormick as Cole, Aaron Abrams as Dr. Maybrook, and starring Katie Douglas as Quinn Maybrook. As you mentioned, based on the novel by Adam Caesar and written by Carter Blanchard and Eli Craig for the screen, and directed, of course, by Eli Craig. Damon, we are not just dealing with any old movie tonight. We are dealing with Damon's very much anticipated Clown in a Cornfield.
So a few years ago, this is going back, I don't know what, maybe 5 or 6 years at this point. I used to have a bad habit at night when I went to bed. I would watch TV when I went to bed. I would turn on TV, watch usually like an episode of Seinfeld, just something like kind of, I could just relax to and then I'd fall asleep. But my girlfriend, who would go to bed before me, would always get woken up, even with the TV on like the lowest volume. And so I was like, I can't keep disturbing her. I got to find something else to do when I go to bed. So I was like, you know what? I should be reading more. I really should be reading more. So I started reading books at night. And, I was always a book reader, but just never to that extent. And so like every night before bed, I would go in and read a couple chapters of a book. And as I got deeper and deeper into reading books, as a horror fan, I read horror books because those are my favorites. And I can't remember, I at some point looking up on the internet and saying, what are some good slasher novels? Because it's well documented on this show. I'm a massive slasher fan. And at some point, I discovered a book called Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Caesar. I heard about it. I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. This sounds right up my alley. Read it, absolutely adored the book, and I want to say it was within like a year of the second one coming out. This is so far 3 books in the series. There is a 4th one coming out now. But I was immediately entranced. I was like, oh, this is everything I want. It feels like a slasher. It feels like a classic 80s, 90s slasher set in book form. It was everything I could have wanted. And I've read all 3 books, and actually getting ready for the movie, I've reread all 3 books. So this one is definitely near and dear to my heart. This is, I would say, and people might laugh when I say this, but I do mean it when I say it. This is for the book readers who were like the hardcore Song of Ice and Fire readers who were like clenching their buttholes waiting for Game of Thrones to come out. That's how much I love Clown in a Cornfield. So when I knew this was coming out, I was excited, but also incredibly nervous because we talked about it with Until Dawn. These adaptations can hit you in a good way or a bad way, but I am standing by my oath, Patrick. I am not going to judge this solely based upon being a book reader. I will say, though, my excitement was built up because of how much I love these books.
There was this fervent anticipation for Clown in a Cornfield. Now, Damon, you know me, I'm a complete Luddite. It took me years to read Saga of the Swamp Thing, and that's mostly pictures. Like, I just have difficulty reading. It's hard for me. I'm reading a great book by a horror author right now, Anya, what's her name?
Anya Alborn, yeah.
Anya Alborn. It's a fantastic novel, Damon. I think it's been 8 months. I don't think it's 400 pages. It's
which one are you reading? Which one are you
Brother.
reading? I'm curious.
Have you ever read Brother?
Oh, dude. Okay, I'm sorry to get off subject. That book will knock you on your ass. That was one of the books that I read. By the end of it, I was like, I need like a Xanax. So you are in for a treat. That is an incredible book. Sorry, I just had to put that out there.
If I could ever get through it, it's very difficult for me to read, honestly. Like I read just fine. I can read the words just fine, but string more than 15 of them together and you got a problem. Like it really is difficult for me. So I don't read. But boy, do I spend a lot of time on social media. What else is new? Everybody's like, get in line. So do we, Patrick. The anticipation for Clown in the Cornfield has been very high. Obviously, I ignore everything because you know me, Damon. I don't touch a synopsis. I don't watch a trailer. I didn't know jack shiz about this other than it was one of Damon's most highly anticipated horror films of the year and 100% one of your most favorite books of all time. So I'm like, this is going to be a big fucking deal for Damon. How will I feel about it having no zero expectation, zero, influence coming in? I'm just coming in going, what do you got for me? What is Clown in a Cornfield? And you bring up Until Dawn, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. The similarities are glaring. They're very similar to me as a movie goer who has no reference, no frame of reference for the source material. These movies feel very similar to me. Does that mean I'm giving Clown in a Cornfield the gold star like I did with Until Dawn? Well, you'll have to tune in and find out, folks. We're going to get into that right now. Damon, how do we tell people about the plot of this movie? You're the expert. You're the Clown in the Cornfield guy. They're waiting on bated breath. Do we go see this movie? We have to know what Patrick and Damon think. We have some wonderful listeners out there who give us tons of great feedback. Damon Martin, what the heck is Clown in the Cornfield really all about?
So, Clown in the Cornfield is the story of Quinn and her father, Glenn Maybrook. They moved from Philadelphia to a tiny little town in Missouri called Kettle Springs. They leave Philadelphia because Quinn's mother and Glenn's wife overdoses on drugs. And he is an ER doctor, emergency room doctor, and he just does not have the wherewithal to do it anymore after his wife dies. He just doesn't have the stress or the anxiety to deal with it anymore. And so he wants a fresh start. And he can't think of a better way to get away from the hustle and bustle of a big city than to move to a one-horse small town in nowhere, Missouri, in a town called Kettle Springs. They have one doctor in town. That doctor has left town, and Glenn Maybrook is taking his place. And as a kid who grew up in a very small town in Ohio and then for the rest of my life has lived in big cities, I went the opposite direction. I cannot even imagine going from a city like Philadelphia, which I've spent a lot of time in Philadelphia.
I like Philly. Shout out to Philly.
Love Philly. I absolutely love Philly. To go from there to a small one-horse town in Missouri, it has got to be the biggest culture shock in the world. So they moved there, and right away, of course, Quinn, the daughter, is a bit of a stranger in a strange land, especially considering she's like a senior in high school, so she's been torn away from everything and everybody she's ever known, but she knows her dad needs this, so they move to this town where he's going to become a doctor, and she's got to get, basically re-affiliated with a whole new school, whole new friends, whole new everything. And when she gets to school, immediately she realizes, there's just this simmering tension between the teachers and the adults in this town and the kids who are all very modern 2000s kids or 2020s kids. They want to go viral. They're social media influencers. They're YouTubers. And that clashes with the almost, for lack of a better word, Andy Griffith of a town where these people are just like, we want it like the good old days. Now, I'm not going to get into a debate about what the good old days actually mean to some folks, but just take that for what you will. These folks are inundated with the idea that they want things to go back to the good old days, and these kids are the exact opposite of what they want for this small little one-horse town. And so there's very much a clash of cultures. And then, we know that at some point, something in a killer shows up in a Frendo the Clown mess. Now, Frendo the Clown, this is not a spoiler. In town, there's a very famous, basically the town is based upon one big factory, the Bay Pin Corn Syrup Factory. And the icon of the Bay Pin Corn Syrup Factory is Frendo the Clown. So everyone, and I know you know towns like this, Patrick, everyone basically works in the town, or they know someone who works, or everyone in town works there, or somebody knows someone who works there. It is just the hub of business in this one-horse town. But unfortunately, months ago, the corn syrup factory caught fire and is now out of business. So now the town is in a really bad spot because everyone's out of work, everyone's pissed off and depressed, but they have this iconic symbol of Frendo the Clown that everyone's so familiar with. And at some point in one night, Frendo the Clown shows up, but he's not there to smile and give you some Bay Pin corn syrup. He's there to murder you. That's really the basics of the plot without getting too deep into spoilers. That is the basis of Clown in a Cornfield, both the book and the movie, by the way.
I don't know where to start with kind of the basics of Clown in the Cornfield because as a completely fresh and new viewer, like I feel like anything I'll say will probably spoil it, because it is a story that indeed is unfolding in, I'd say, rapid succession. This is a 90-minute movie and breezy too. It's a quick 90-minute movie, so I feel like anything I get into is sort of spoilery. So instead, Damon, what I'm going to talk about is my experience with the tone of this movie. Now, again, I'm saying this movie, because I have no idea what the book is. If you're a book reader out there of Clown in the Cornfield, like Damon Martin himself, you're going, yeah, but in the book, I don't know anything about the book. I know about the movie that I sat in front of. That's all I know. I felt confused by the tone of this movie. The first part of this movie, I would say tonally is rather not, I wouldn't say serious, but certainly kind of straightforward. Like Until Dawn, which is my closest frame of reference here, pretty much a serious movie. There's a couple of quips in it, couple of funny little laughable moments that kind of tap you with a little bit of humor here and there, but otherwise, that movie just kind of tries to be dreadful and kind of straightforward, and I feel like Clown in the Cornfield is a good comparison to this movie tonally. But that first half of the movie is very much that. I was not ready for what I interpret, Damon, as a colossal shift in tone at about the halfway point, or when the shit hits the fan in this movie. Let's just say, when Frendo shows up, which is what a good slasher should do. Tonally, Damon, the shift to me was turned severely to slapstick comedy, like. Again, I don't want to get too much into it, but sort of like almost stop in the moment of terror, and make a long-winded joke, kind of comedy, almost like a Deadpool-y, almost, without looking at the camera, obviously. I don't know if you saw it that way, but as somebody who had no frame of reference, who had no bearings at all, when I sat down for this movie, to me, it just felt like a 180 shift in the middle of the movie. That was rather jarring for me. Do you feel that way about the movie, even knowing how the book is obviously clearly more fleshed out? It's a book; it can be. To you, did the movie have that incredible tone shift for you?
Not as extreme as it did for you, but I will say I noticed the comedy elements of it. But I will say this. I think that, and this is not me defending it, this is just my interpretation.
Sure.
I think it was just, that's the teenager.
You can defend it in spoilers, by the way.
What I'm saying, I think that's the teenager of it all, because the teenagers, when you meet the teenagers in this town, and this is not a spoiler, I already said earlier in the show, they're very much of today's teens. They are not interested, a lot of the kids are not interested in learning or being in a classroom. They want to make videos, they want to go viral, they want to be influencers. That's not uncommon, because guess what, Patrick? You and I are on TikTok. We're much older, but we want to be influencers too. And so I think when you inject that realism of today, I know this is, people are going to be like, good God, that's a bad comparison. It's the only thing I can really come up with, because they were of that era and became huge influencers, is like Jake and Logan Paul. Like, everything they did was to make a joke of something. That was how they got famous. Now, I was not familiar with them until they were already huge, massive stars from Vine and YouTube. I got to know them through my other job where I cover combat sports, and they got involved in boxing and mixed martial arts. I was not familiar, but learning about them, I was like, oh, everything they do is trying to make people laugh or trying to be funny. Yeah. So I kind of took a little bit of that element into these kids, because it kind of felt like because what you're talking about, the tonal shift, the 180 at the midway point, is when you really are focused solely more on the teens. And that's when the slashing starts. That's when this turns into a dyed-in-the-wool slasher film. So I understand what you're saying, and you're not wrong in terms of the tone of the movie, but I think that it's purposeful, because that's what these kids are. That's who these kids are. That's of that era and of today, and it's something that you and I probably don't totally understand, because we're old fogies, but it kind of feels like that to me, where everything to them kind of turns into a joke. And I also think that's a bit of the theme of the movie, because there, as I mentioned in the intro, for people who maybe watch us on YouTube who don't hear the intro, there's this underlying tension from minute one in this movie between the adults in this town and the older folks in this town, the teenagers. And Trust me when I say, while this film is, of course, a movie and it's a dramatic version of events, there are 100% places in the world where this exists, where the adults in town are like, we need to get control of these kids. These kids are out of control. They're ruining everything. They're messing up our sweet hometown. And the kids are like, we're just acting like every other kid in America right now. So I think that tonal shift at the halfway point is when we really start focusing on the teens, and I think that's why.
I'm with you because I enjoyed a really what I thought was a very fun slasher that you and I both enjoyed, but no one else seemed to care about, which was Hell of a Summer, which we talked about, Finn Wolfhard's movie. Finn Wolfhard's movie establishes very quickly that Gen Zers, like, they take the piss out of everything. Like in the worst possible scenario, they're cracking jokes. The difference between Hell of a Summer and Clown in a Cornfield is that's established from like moment one. We're in a comedy from moment one. And tonally, I knew that. Again, coming in completely blind. And, even though I know you can judge it fairly because you're an expert at this stuff now, we've done 270 films. Damon is quite the expert at this, and he knows how to separate the two things. But even still, you can't avoid knowing in the back of your head that you're going to get a lot of comedy in this movie. As the blind man coming in, I go, whoa, wait a minute. I wasn't expecting those particular sights and sounds and smells. And I guess my critique there is that they happen on a dime. They aren't established or gradually put in there. It's almost like you get two different movies. That's not necessarily even a bad thing. Like, I'm not even judging it negatively for that. I was just like, whoa, it went from like kind of, they had to kind of build the world, which it makes sense. You've got to do that for about the first 20, 25 minutes. They got to build that world up. And it was pretty dramatic and pretty heavy. You deal with what you're talking about with the dads or with their mom having died and all that stuff. So they're bringing heavy topics in, fish out of water story. You're getting all the ideas. They're all coming in. And then it's just like the comedy element became, this is a negative way to say it, but it just became overbearing. I was like, wow, like it's all about the comedy, kind of, in its own Clown in a Cornfield way.
It's weird because while I did pick up on the comedy, I didn't really think it was that heavily. Like, I didn't feel like it was that heavy in the second half of the movie. I'm thinking, like, did I miss something? Because now I will say this. I'm not going to turn this into a let's compare the movie to the book podcast. I'm not doing that. I promise.
Sure.
You. But I will say just tonally, because that's what we're talking about, the film is definitely funnier than the book, meaning that in Eli Craig, if you know Eli Craig, who directed Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which is a really fun, kind of goofy, horror-ish, much more comedy than horror, but has horror elements in it. It kind of felt like that influence. And I'm not condemning him. I'm not saying he did a bad job. Sure. I'm just saying, like, it felt like that was his idea or the writer's idea that adapted this in the screenplay, injecting the comedy, a little bit more comedy elements. When you read the book, there are some funny moments, but it's not written that way. It's not really written, in my opinion, as like a funny story. And I don't know if I don't know if Adam Caesar just didn't write it, or like me personally, I've said this on the show before. When I write my own stuff, I don't ever try to inject comedy because I just don't know that I have the ability to be funny. I can be funny off the cuff, and I can make jokes about like not being able to fit through a cave floor in the descent and being stuck and things like that. But I'm not. I am so like lack of confidence writing comedy that I just tend not to do it because I'm like, I'm going to write this to be funny, and someone's going to read this and be like, that's not funny. So I just don't really inject a lot of comedy in the things that I write. And I feel like Adam Caesar, like, he has the ability to do that, but it's not as heavy. Now, I kind of disagree in terms of, like, the tonal shift. It is funnier, and the teens do have kind of that goofy attitude, but I kind of took it as this is just teenagers versus where you felt like it was a 180. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that I didn't feel that huge tonal shift in the movie. What I did feel was the turn of events going from the the stage setting of this world, who these people are, because this is actually like a pretty big cast when you really think about it. A lot of kids, a lot of them adults, so you have to kind of get the lay of the land. And then when you get to the actual slashing, for lack of a better word, in Scream, when they go to Stu Macher's house, and that's when the shit really hits the fan. That's the tonal shift in this movie, is when the kids start getting slashed. And so that's what I took it as. And while I did notice some of the comedy, it wasn't as severe to me as I think you did. And that's not, and the reason I say I took it differently is because that's not the tone of the book. So
right.
it was foreign to me too, I guess. I'm not going to turn this into like, this is book versus movie.
Sure, yeah, no.
Totally, this was different than the book. So it would have hit me the same. It just didn't hit me the same.
Yes, how it hit me was I came in watching Until Dawn, and when the shit hit the fan, it turned into Hell of a Summer. That's literally, that's how I would posit this movie. I mean, they established like the other teens in the city, in the town, are already kind of a little bit goofier. I mean, a little bit, not much, but boy, it just gets it. When the slashing starts, they lay it on thick. Like every kill has a joke to go with it. Every kill has some sort of quip, some sort of thing. They don't just run and scream. So I guess that's the best way I can describe it, is imagine walking into Until Dawn, and when people start getting killed, they start turning into Hell of a Summer, which, when you compare the things, you're like, hey, that actually sounds like a great combination of movies for me. Like, I'd kind of work it out. Like, Until Dawn was maybe a little too self-serious, and Hell of a Summer didn't have enough kill and gore and heaviness in it. Like those are certainly the issues with those movies, and this one kind of combines them. Did it work for me, Damon? I think that's more of a spoiler discussion than anything else.
It's funny because this is, I mean, for anyone who doesn't know this already, this is a dyed-in-the-wool slasher. If you are a slasher horror fan, I'm going to wager pretty heavily that you're going to mostly enjoy this movie. I'm not saying you're going to love it. I'm not saying it's going to be your favorite movie of the year. But if you are an old-school slasher fan, like I am, I'm wearing my Slumber Party Massacre t-shirt right now. If you are a slasher fan, you are probably going to enjoy Cloud in the Cornfield. They're not reinventing the wheel here. I'm telling you that ahead of time. This is not elevated horror or any of those stupid bullshit terms. This is a straight up classic 80s, 90s. If you loved 80s and 90s slashers, you're probably going to enjoy Clown in the Cornfield, because they are not trying to reinvent the wheel. And there's something to be appreciated about that. Because I think a lot of times, and I've said this on the show before, I enjoy those really like mind-bending, crazy idea horror films. I've kind of come to love some of those. You and I have talked many times about Robert Eggers films and why am I not
Ari Aster?
Ari Aster, thank you. Ari Aster films. And I enjoy those. I've actually really come to love a lot of those films. And that I credit a lot of that to doing this podcast with you, Patrick, because you kind of turned me on to being a bit of an art house goon. But the reason why Clown in the Cornfield works so well for me is because it does take it back to the classics. It does take it back to the 80s slashers. And just like when Scream came out in 96 and it totally reinvented the genre, I'm not saying Clown in the Cornfield is that by any stretch. If anything, I would say this is more of an older school, like 80s, straight up
feels more
slasher
80s.
Film. Yeah. But I appreciate the authenticity to that they're not overcomplicating it. And the plot at the heart of this movie is more modern. Because I'm not saying this didn't happen in the 80s or 60s or 70s or other times, but there is a real disconnect, it seems like today, between Gen Z and Gen X or Gen Z and millennials or whatever generation we're talking about here. There is a real disconnect there. You see it a lot. And I think that's a product of the times. We talk about like when our parents were growing up, everybody of our parents' age group could own a home. Now, you own a home. I sure as shit don't, and I couldn't afford one if I wanted to. And that is a problem. We talk about kids coming out of college now. Back in the day, you come out of college, you could afford to buy a house, you could afford to buy a car, start a family. That's not today. And so kids, teenagers at 18, 19, 20, or 22 coming out of college, they are not in that position. And those are just all those little differences of yesteryear and today. And I think the film does a good job of explaining the version of those teenagers, even though they are growing up in small town America. So I think it's an 80s slasher with a modern tinge is the way I would spin it.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's got a little bit of modern, I would say like late 90s, early 2000s sophistication to it, and even some of the stuff is even, I would say, just downright modern. Obviously the YouTube aspect of it, like that's obvious, but even more so like socially speaking, I think it feels more modern than even the 2000s. But it did remind me very much of like 2000s slasher groups with 80s kind of I would say antagonist sensibility. Like it felt like a little old school on the evil side of it, and new school on the protagonist side of it.
And one last thing I'll say before I'm sure we want to get to spoilers here. I want to say this because I think, and I've had this discussion with you, and this is not me defending Clown in the Cornfield. This is more me just in general with films, horror films coming out these days. I think we may have had this discussion on one of our year-end shows. Maybe it was a couple of years ago, and I know we've had this discussion privately. I feel like sometimes we get locked in as reviewers that we try to pick the most obscure films, books, music to feel special, if that makes sense. Like, I see it all the time, especially in music reviews. I'm a big music guy. Where I worked at a music store for many years. I'm a big music guy. And I'll click on, I'm a big metal guy, I'm a heavy metal fan. And I'll click on an article from, Revolver or any of the metal, Metal Injection, whatever, any of the other things that are out there. And they'll say top 10 metal albums of the year. I'm like, awesome, let's see what's out there. And I've never heard of any of these bands or these songs, these fucking albums. Like, who are you listening to? And you can tell, it's almost like they went out of their way to pick the 10 most. I'm not saying they don't really like the albums. They just feel like they pick the most obscure things possible. Like, no one is picking for your favorite album. You might see occasionally like someone like the new Kendrick Lamar, because everyone likes Kendrick Lamar. But then like the other 9 are just like these random. Here's this underground rapper who started out rapping in a toilet, and now he's famous, and his name is TP. Like they're who are these people?
Yeah.
I get so frustrated, and we've had this discussion about movies too with the Oscars. Like, I feel that while I love films like Anora and films that won a lot of awards, of course, The Substance was one of our favorites last year. Sometimes I feel like you're not making things accessible to the wider audience. Like, I'm not saying The Brutalist isn't a good movie, but you're asking a lot for people to sit down for 3.5 hours, 4 hours in a movie theater for such a serious drama. I'm not saying it's not good. It was a great movie, by the way. But you got to remember the general audience. You're not going to get people to spend $1 billion on The Brutalist. It's just never going to happen. So I feel like sometimes you got to mix things in. Like we talked this year, Sinners is the perfect example of a movie that's making bonkers money, but it's a really intelligent, really deeply entrenched themed movie. That's a rare one, though. That's a rare one.
Yeah.
And the whole point I'm making about this is, Clown in the Cornfield is not reinventing anything. It's not out there. I'm not saying this is Scream in 96 when that came out and kind of reinvented. It's not. But sometimes I just want to go to a movie and have fun and watch a good old-fashioned slasher that gets it right. And we talked about this a couple of years ago with a movie called Founders Day. I don't know why I always go back to that one. That movie had a pretty good concept and some pretty decent kills, but they just tried way too hard in the story, and it just didn't make sense, and it didn't work, and by the end we were confused, and we're like, what was the point of this? Was dumb. Like, you tried way too hard. You actually had the formula. You had the formula for a pretty good movie, but you just messed it up. You tried way too hard to make it a mystery and all these unravelings and all the things they're doing that in the story. Clown in the Cornfield is easy to understand. It's a fun story with pretty enjoyable characters, fun kills, and a really iconic killer. Frendo the Clown is an iconic-looking villain. So that's sometimes all you need. This is not me justifying why I love it. I'm just saying that don't go to this one thinking I'm going to wrap my head around this at the end of the year. I've got to write a 3,000-word thesis on why this was a good movie. You know what I mean? I feel like that's what people do sometimes. They're like, hold on, I got to explain why I loved whatever, obscure random horror movie. This is not that. If you like slashers if you grew up in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s loving the classic slashers, masked slashers, you're probably going to enjoy this film. If you're not into those movies and you're like, oh, that's just so beneath me, I need Hereditary, I need Midsommar, I need whatever the fuck, maybe you're not going to like that. And that's okay. But I'm just telling you, this is a simple, boiled down formula. And for me, it works.
Let's get into spoilers for my retort, Damon, because I actually disagree with you. But I got to get into spoilers to do it.
All right, so we're not going to get into spoilers. Before we do that, I want to give a shout out once again as we continue to tease this. We are going to be launching a Patreon page very soon, so stay tuned for that. There is a post up on our Instagram right now. Go search Rewind of the Living Dead on Instagram if you're not following us over there. Why aren't you following us over there?
Yeah, come on.
But follow us over there, and you will see a page saying coming soon to Patreon, and we are taking suggestions. What would you like for us to be on Patreon? Now, I want to be clear about this because I put it in the post too. The podcast is not going to suddenly start cost you money. It's free now. It's always going to be free. Our Patreon is going to be for extras, more reviews, maybe some movie commentaries. Maybe we're going to review some movies that aren't necessarily horror. We're going to listen to you for what you would hear from us, what you'd be willing to say. You know what? I'll plop down an extra $5 a month to listen to you idiots wax poetic about the new Karate Kid movie or whatever. So go over to that page, find that post, and suggest to us what you'd like to hear on our Patreon page. We are going to be launching it soon. We're not giving a hard date yet, but stay tuned for more details on our Patreon page coming soon. With that being said, Patrick, we are now going to get into full spoilers. So if you have not seen or read Clown in the Cornfield, I'm saying that as a very distinct point because I guess this is a slight spoiler, but not really. This movie is pretty faithful to the book. So if you've read the book, you can probably go in and say you have a pretty good idea what's going to happen in the movie. So we are now in full spoilers. Patrick, I will turn the floor over to you and tell me why you hated this movie.
I didn't hate this movie, but I will say this. You said pre-spoilers, but if you love slashers and they're not beneath you, I think you'll like Clown in the Cornfield. Damon, I love slashers. Friday the 13th is basically, that's all it is. It's not even anything else. It doesn't even have a story. It is just a slasher. That's all it is. It's a big guy with a knife, and there's not much else to it. I love slashers. I grew up with slashers. I grew up in the 80s when the stories were very unsophisticated. I think the most sophisticated stuff we got out of the 1980s was like Nightmare on Elm Street. I think that was as sophisticated as it got. Everything else was kind of, hey, you're stretching it, pal. Like most of that stuff doesn't even hold up today. But I am a fan of that stuff, and I'm a fan of slashers. And this isn't me going to the Oscars and going, how does Clown in the Cornfield hold up against The Substance? They don't. But that's fine, by the way. I think with regards to award shows, Damon, I would say what we probably need for award shows is like a People's Choice award show. I think that's more suitable for people. I think there's a very good place for something like the Oscars. I defend that because I think it's about the arts and the technical achievements and all that stuff. It's a different thing that just happens to be a very mainstream event, but it's actually a very like insider type thing. Clown in a Cornfield, I'm judging it against its peers. I didn't bring up Hereditary tonight. I didn't bring up The Substance. I didn't bring up any of those things. I brought up Until Dawn and I brought up Hell of a Summer. I believe those are its peers. I believe that if you dug either of those movies or you kind of liked those movies, I think you're kind of going to like this movie too. I'm only comparing it to stuff that I believe it's comparable to. I can't speak on the book, so I'm sure it's great. Adam Caesar seems like a great guy. A lot of our influencer buddies are friends with him. He seems like an awesome human being, and I'm happy for him that he has all this success and all this stuff. I just think that when I think of Until Dawn, it knew what it was from moment one, and it gave us that. Same thing with Hell of a Summer. It knew what it was from moment one, and it gave us that. I think in translating the book Clown in a Cornfield, something on Eli Craig's docket was difficult, which is like, how do I establish everything I need to establish about this story in 90 minutes? And that may have created, in my opinion, a bit of an imbalance because it is serious. Now, the first half is serious with this character, Quinn, who we meet. She's kind of emo, kind of fish out of water. the you're not quite sure how the teens in town feel about her, and you're also very sure that the adults in town don't like her because she's a teen, because they don't like teens. And you get sort of the sense that the adults in town believe the teens burned down the corn syrup factory. And they're all sort of pissed about it. I like that, and it was easy to understand. I go, yeah, that makes sense. They're just like, these fucking teens, we can't prove it, but they basically destroy our town because of their shenanigans, because they're these influencers and all this stuff. Like, I'm sure, and obviously it must have been them. Quinn is picking up on that right away. She realizes, like, everybody in this world is kind of weird, and I don't really like it. And she falls for basically the town heir, this kid named Cole, handsome kid, charismatic kid, and he immediately sweeps her up. He likes her very much, very clearly, and he's just like, I want you to be part of our gang that makes these Frendo the Clown videos, and they do great on YouTube, and you'd be perfect to hang out with us. And you're sort of, I guess you're pulled in a few directions. Like, is she getting in with the wrong crowd? We don't know. Sometimes they cut back to her dad, and he's like, you shouldn't be hanging out with these kids. You don't know them. You don't know what they're up to. So they're kind of setting us up too, to be in those same shoes. And you're like, okay, great. And then I think all hell starts to break loose. They make one video, and she realizes right away, there's another clown in the back of your video that wasn't, so-and-so, whoever typically wears the clown mask. There seems to be another one. And then you're like, huh, okay. Right away, I was like, oh, are we talking supernatural? Is there like a Frendo spirit that lives in that like factory? I don't know. I don't read the books. I have no idea where it's going. Where it goes to, Damon, is there's this big part. It coalesces, or it culminates in this big party that Cole's throwing for the town teens, because they all want to hang out. They all want to have fun. They go to this the old farmhouse, and they're going to throw a raucous event. And Frendo hits on that night. Very, very Freddy versus Jason when they're in the cornfield party. Like, it's kind of that and what happens. And then something else happens, Damon. A bunch of Frendos come out of the woodwork. They come out of that cornfield, and I'm like, oh, there's like 13, I don't know how many, but there's a lot here. And immediately I said, oh, it's the adults in town. Like, there's no secret here. It's adults in town. And then next step is like, one of them is like holding the dad hostage. He's a doctor, like, fix this guy. And I'm like, okay, they're not supernatural. That's out. It's definitely the people in the town. They weren't even trying to hide it, really. It didn't even feel like it was being hidden at that point. And then it is exactly that. It turns into, yep, the masks come off, and it's all the adults who, well, I'll let you explain that part better, because I did find it a little under-established why they were doing it. I'll let you explain it. But what I found, Damon, aside from the jarring, tonal shift to like, we're being killed, let's stop and make jokes, I found that it wasn't subversive enough. I knew at a point, I was very clear that all these clowns are the adult townsfolk, and then it was them. And it surprised me none in the least. And then it just, it saw its way through to the end without any sort of twist, without any sort of turn. It just was. And I was like, okay, well, it just was. But I've seen two other movies that just were Hell of a Summer, Until Dawn, but they subverted my expectations in ways that were unique. Hell of a Summer was a full-blown comedy from the jump, and it was funny, and it was about the funny, and the slashing was an aside. Until Dawn was like some sort of splatterfest that I wasn't expecting the group to get splattered and slashed over and over and over again, so it delivered on those goods. I just felt like Clown in the Cornfield because of how straightforward it was. It was like this straight line to the end that I wasn't surprised, I wasn't shocked. The kills were okay. They weren't on Until Dawn level, but they were way above Hell of a Summer. So I just kind of left feeling like, I don't know. This didn't feel like something that's going to end up in my top 10 at the end of the year.
So I'll counter slightly with 2 points, and I'll say, and this again, I'm bringing this as a book comparison, but only because I want to use it as a criticism of the movie. In the book, when the clowns attack the kids at this party. So you forgot to mention that they all go to this Founders Day parade, which is this big deal in town every year.
Right.
They have this big Founders Day parade. and it's the celebration of the town. And this is the first year they've had it when the Bay Pin corn syrup factory is burned down, so a lot of people are out of work, and they're trying to use it as like a celebration to boost the town's mood. And even then, the teens fuck it up because they end up accidentally setting fire to the giant Frendo float, and it falls, and a kid gets hurt, and it's just literally the worst case scenario for these teens who are already pissing off the adults in this town. And so that night, Cole Hill, who is the son of Arthur Hill is the guy who owned the Bay Pin corn syrup factory, the big rich guy in town. He says every year while they're doing the stupid Founders Day thing, we actually have a party out in the field of this farmhouse owned by the Tillersons. And in the book, they make it more clear the Tillersons always leave during that part of the season, so they know that's why they can use their farmhouse. It's not really a major plot point. I'm just mentioning that. Like, they don't really mention why the family's gone. They say that in the book, that like they're always gone, so that's why they always hold it there. So they go out there. That's the teen celebration. They're having their own Founders Day celebration in this barn and in the middle of nowhere. And then the Frendos show up and kill people, and then out of nowhere, it's like 20 Frendos. That's very similar. Now, here's where the mystery and the thing you're talking about changed from the book to the movie that didn't work for me. Okay. So when the initial Frendos attack, and the one has the crossbow, that's the very first Frendo we meet. He has a crossbow. He kills a girl named Ginger, who actually has a little bit bigger part in the book, but neither here nor there. Kills her, and they realize, oh shit, this isn't a prank. This is actually, we're getting murdered. And he starts firing crossbow bolts and killing kids. Now, at one point, Rust, who is kind of the redneck kid in town, who kind of the outsider, doesn't really hang out with popular kids, he was out hunting, and he shows back up with a shotgun, and he shoots the Frendo. And we realize right then and there, this is not a supernatural Frendo, it is a person. And he says, take off the mask, see who it is. And Quinn goes to remove the mask, but then another Frendo shows up and starts firing, starts coming after them with a chainsaw, and they're like, oh shit, we got to get out of here. That, to me, was a mistake, because in the book, you realize the first Frendo that gets killed is Mr. Fern, the science teacher at the beginning of the movie, who's like disciplining them and ends up sending them to detention. They reveal right away it's him, and you're like, oh shit, this is our teacher. What the fuck? And so they know right away this is like the adults are coming after them. Now, what they don't know is who all's coming after them. They know Mr. Fern is there, but they don't know how deep this goes. So the mystery in the book that I think could have worked better in the movie was to reveal that was Mr. Fern in that first clown costume. Here's where the surprise comes in, where you're talking about where you say, like, they tried too hard not to let you know it was the adults, but we knew it was the adults. They should have actually revealed it to be Mr. Fern. That would have been my first. As soon as you know it's him, you're like, oh, this is the adults. Because that's not really the mystery. Even in the book, that's not the mystery. The two mystery elements, and one worked in the movie and the other kind of didn't. One was that there's like 20 Frendos. I think that was the element, because when you see the earlier killings, a couple of the kids get knocked off earlier by a Frendo. At that point in the movie, I have to assume you assume there's one Frendo, because it's just a Frendo killing. It's the surprise is there, like when 20 Frendos come pouring out of the cornfield, you're like, oh shit, this isn't one guy on a killing spree. This is like 20 people. That's the surprise, not who it is. And then the bigger surprise of who it is at the end when you reveal that the linchpin behind this whole thing is actually Arthur Hill, Cole's father, the guy who was the owner of the Bay Pin corn syrup factory. And the reason why that's such a shock is because the sheriff fucking hates Cole Hill. He hates him. He knows Cole is like the leader of this group of teenagers who keeps fucking everything up, and he blames him for everything, and he is the guy that the entire town blames for burning down the corn syrup factory, because he was there filming one of his videos. He left, the factory burned down. They said it was a electrical mishap, but the entire town's like, you did it, Cole. You're the fuck up. We know you did it. Now, that Arthur Hill's revelation that he was going to kill his own son, that's the twist. Not that it's the adults. So I think that's the mistake that was made. The big surprise, the big reveal was, A, there's 20 Frendos, because you don't really see that coming when you see one Frendo killing people, even with the crossbow. It's just one Frendo. That's a twist. And the other twist is that Arthur Hill, the guy whose son is basically getting strung up, the sheriff arrests him and takes him into town, and you're like, what the fuck? It's his own father. Like, that's fucked up. Like, I don't care how badly you messed up in life, you'd hope your own dad wouldn't plot your murder. That's the other twist. So it's kind of discombobulated in the movie a little bit, because in the book, as I said, I'm not trying to just compare it. I'm just telling you the difference. They don't really hide that it's the adults. Once Mr. Fern is figured out, they pull out that first mask, they know it's them. And when Quinn went to remove the mask in the movie, I'm like, oh, here we go. And they didn't remove the mask. I'm like, hold on, why are we still like, we know this is the adults. So that kind of bummed me out, because that let the kids know who's coming after them. That was my opinion. So I think the twists were 20 Frendos and Arthur Hill. That was the twist, not that it was the adults. They waited too long to reveal that it was the adults.
They do wait long, and then honestly, once they revealed that it was the adults, even though it was painfully obvious, I never got a sense for why they needed to get rid of these kids. Like, I understand they didn't like them, but the sheriff and Arthur Hill are clearly working together. Is that the same case in the book?
Yes.
Okay, if Arthur Hill and the sheriff are working together, why is it important for them to get rid of the kids? I never picked up on this in the movie.
So they actually do explain it in the movie. Maybe you missed it. When they finally capture Quinn and they bring her to the Bay Pin corn syrup factory and they tie her down, Arthur Hill literally gives the explanation when he says that every so often this town spirals out of control. It happened in the 60s when my great-grandfather was here. It happened in the 70s. It happened in the 90s. So the movie opens with a kill in 1991 at a separate farmhouse party, and a friendo kills a couple of teens, and then they just kind of go away. You don't really understand why that's there. It's the cold open of a murder. And when they get into the Tillerson's house in the movie, you see this big display of like all these newspaper articles, and like where you can tell this has been a plot that these people have been doing for years. So basically what Arthur Hill explains is he's like, every so often the kids in this town get out of control, and the only way we can get things back to normal is to literally root them out. Rooting them out means killing them. So this has been like a practice in this town for 70 years, 100 years, however many years you're going back. The town's, I think they're saying like it's 100 years, Founders Day is 100 years old or something to that effect. So like for the last 100 years, every time there's like, you know, that group of kids gets out of control and they get a little wild and they get a little, you know, rambunctious and they can't get controlled anymore, they just whack out the fucking kids. And so that's the reason, is like, we want to get rid of you because you are the problem. We're going to get rid of you because you're the ones fucking up our beautiful small little Mayberry, is essentially the plot of it.
And that's what confused me, because I did hear that. But I was like, why is it important for them to get rid of these kids? Like actually important. Like, I could understand if it was the same group of people over, like, let's say every 5 years they did this. And, you know, you're kind of dealing with like a bunch of boomers, right? A bunch of 60, 70-year-olds who'd be like, we've been doing this for 40 years. Every 40 year or every 10 years or so, we take the kids that we don't like and we get rid of them. But this is like a generational thing. And it didn't make sense in my brain. I was like, so I'm sorry, like, you kill off a whole generation of people? Like, then how did you, Arthur Hill, survive? Because wouldn't your dad have taken you out? Like, it raised more questions than it did give answers. The motivation did not make sense to me.
Well,
like, so they just don't like him?
This is not me trying to explain the movie, because I promise it doesn't go that deep. You got to remember, and I think this also goes into budget, not to make excuses for the movie, but you got to remember, like, even though it's a small town, like, the party that they're at, there's maybe like 50 kids, 40 kids.
Sure.
There's more kids. Like, they're not killing every kid in town. They're not just wiping out the entire.
But they're in a small town, though, if I may, in a small town like that, in a hamlet, you're killing off the entire senior class. Like, you're actually taking a generation of people out. Like, actually.
You're not. And here's why I argue against it, because my high school was tiny. My graduating class was 95 people. That's all. 95 people. But that was every class. So my entire high school was like 500 kids total. Of like that was 4 grades: freshman, sophomore, junior, and seniors. That was like 500 students total. Now, I'm not saying wiping out 50 is a good thing. I'm just saying, like, if you wipe out 50, there's still 450 more. So I think the idea is, and you know, Cole Hill being the linchpin of this all, being the leader, is they're just like they're wiping out the kids who are Cole Hill and his followers. They're getting rid of them. So I don't know a better way to explain it than just saying, like, if you're at a cliquey school, or you watch, like, let's say disturbing behavior. When they make it very clear in disturbing behavior, there's like the cliques. There's like the popular clique, and then there's like the gearheads who are all like the motorheads, the car kids, and then there's like the skater kids, and then there's like the total outcasts, like metalheads. Think of this, and that's in what is supposed to be a very big school, I have to assume, in that school in disturbing behavior. Imagine this is just them wiping out the gearheads. Like, they're not wiping out every kid in town. They're wiping out the problematic, or what they deem problematic. So when you go, like, the very first early scene when Quinn goes to school and she sits down in this class where Mr. Ferns throws like 5 or 6 of them into detention, the class is 25 kids, but it's like 6 of them get sent to detention. So I think that's kind of the point. You got 50 kids who are out partying, being bad, and doing what their parents don't want them to do. Let's just lay them out. Get rid of them. We're going to pull out the root and stem, and then what's left are the good kids, the kids who actually obey their parents, the kids who actually do their schoolwork. And so they're not wiping out the entire generation. They're not wiping out 400 kids. They're wiping out the 50 bad kids, or the kids they deem as the 50 bad kids.
It's just a little convoluted. It just is it raises more questions than it answers. These were the more, I would argue, like, successful kids in the town. These were more well-established, well-to-do kids. One of them is the town leader's son. Like, he's influential. He's essentially the heir apparent. So it's that's also weird. It's like, okay, so does Arthur Hill have like younger kids that he's willing to groom better? It raised more questions than it should have for me. Because I did hear that explanation, but I was like, but it didn't track for what was going on. I was like, why is it so important to slaughter 50 kids? Like, super important that they have to do this massive coordinated attack where law enforcement, leaders of the town, and you know, like, teachers and restaurant workers, like, all have to get together to do, like, it's that important? And I like it, that portion of it wasn't well established in the movie. They were just irritated with the kids, and they gave a reason why they're irritated, but that reason turns out to be total bullshit. They know, because they're all in cahoots with Arthur Hill, so they actually know why. So the whole goal was just like, damn these meddling kids, the only thing we can do for them is massacre them. And I think I just don't think it was a strong enough motivation for my viewing experience.
And I disagree, because I think that speaks to the simplicity of it, is saying that, like, what's the simplest thing to understand when you've got problematic kids? Well, we watched a million coming of age movies that takes place in schools. Imagine The Breakfast Club. They all get sent to detention, and then Mr. what's the teacher's name?
I forget his name, but yeah, the head of detention slaughters him.
He just walks in with an M16 and blows the kids. Like, you know what? Fuck you, Judd Nelson. I'm not going to listen to you and your mouth and Anthony Michael Hall. I'm just going to kill you. I'm not saying it's the deepest. Like I said, it's not the deepest.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I think my problem isn't that it's not the deepest. My problem is that it's a little too deep. Like, it's a little bit of an esoteric idea. Like, I get it. Yes, they find these kids to be a nuisance. Are they actually a problem? Like, when you really look at the situation, you go, I don't think they are a problem in this town. I think Arthur Hill's a problem in this town. I think the sheriff's a problem in this town. But they're just going, no, it's these kids. And it really screws this up, that there's also the talk of maybe the kids burned down the place. They know they didn't. Every clown knows that those kids didn't burn down the thing.
They don't, though. That's the thing. Maybe that was not misconstrued. They don't know. The only person who figures it out is at the end. Cole figures out it was his dad who burned down the factory. No one else knows.
So his dad is manipulating the rest of the clowns to believe it's them. Okay. Right. See how that's a lot of moving parts? I'm not saying they didn't lay their tracks. I'm saying that, like, in the movie presented, I think it was a little misweighted. Like I think you need to find a way to make the motivation of the killers stronger to go, I'm going to kill my son and all 50 of these people. Because again, I got no frame of reference, nothing. I'm just in the movie. I have no backstory or anything like that. And I just felt like it was a little weak as it was portrayed in the movie.
I want to. We're gonna do a category of the difference between the book and the movie, and I want to give you one thing. I don't know this would have changed your opinion. The opening of this movie is the original kill, or one of the original kills from 1991, where we realize, and they tell you later in the movie, this is something they've done throughout time. When these kids have gotten out of control, people have just completely fucked up the town. They don't put them in detention. They don't put them in summer school. They just fucking kill them. Yeah, and that's a pretty whacked out theory, and very, very to the heart of a slasher. Like, you know what?
Yeah, oh yeah,
I don't think we can teach these kids. Let's just kill them. That's really what it boils down to. In the book, the actual opening is Cole and his friends at the quarry. They have a quarry where they go swimming. And Cole's little sister is there, and they're all doing the video thing. They're shooting videos. They're trying to go viral. And his sister tries to impress him by jumping off a higher ledge, and she ends up hitting her head and falling into the water. And they realize when she doesn't roll over, they're like, oh, shit, she's hurt. And when they rush over to her, she cracked her head open. She dies. Mm-hmm. And then it's like a year later when Quinn and her father show up, and Cole and his dad Arthur they've basically not spoken more or less for a year because his dad basically hates him for his daughter dying. Mm-hmm. Now they mention that in the movie. Cole tells Quinn, my sister died in the quarry a year ago and my family's never been the same. And then when Arthur finally shows his true colors and says, you're no son of mine, I've disowned you, you're a piece of shit, you killed your sister, I think the actual impact of that would have been felt more if we actually saw it happen, and that gives you that point of reference. I don't know. I'm not saying the opening was bad, and I'm not saying the explanation was bad. I just think that actual physical seeing it happen and the emotional weight of that. But you're probably talking about another, $1 million to build a quarry and a scene that ultimately probably lasts like 3 minutes. When they were like, we could just explain this. I think the weight of it would have been better had they actually shown the kid dying. Because while Arthur Hill is not against the idea this town is being ruined by the children, his is also a personal vendetta against his own son because his daughter died. And I think that would have been better explained had they actually shown the quarry incident. And I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying I think that's probably why they didn't do it. Because
I'm agreeing. I think it would have made it stronger. It would have made a way stronger case.
In movie terms, I think they probably said we can explain it, and it's going to cost us another $1 million to shoot it. I'm just saying. Yeah. I'm not making excuses. I agree. I think it would have been better. I'm just saying. I think that's probably why. And they're like, we could just have it explained. The emotional weight just isn't as great when you just explain it, right? Because you don't see that actual incident happening, and that's the real opening of the book. There is no 1991 killing scene in the book. It's the quarry scene that opens the book.
I think that would have been much better. Much better than the 1991 killing scene. You could have done what we call as a composite, right? Like kind of combine all those things. You could have had those kids sitting at the quarry talking about the legend of what's his name? Binky the Clown. What the hell is his name?
Frendo.
Frendo. You could have those kids at the quarry talking about Frendo the Clown's massacre and how it happened. And then the sister jumps, she hits her head, and they're all dead. And you're like, oh, okay, that had nothing to do with Frendo the Clown. Like, it's just sad. His sister died. But there is this lore. I would have been better off with that. And then, and then drag that scene at least long enough to establish how upset Arthur Hill is with his son. And to see that tension and stuff. So you would really get a sense for, oh, this is why Arthur Hill went through all this trouble to basically gaslight the town into killing 50 teenagers. Like, it would just feel more like solid as an idea. So I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying they made the wrong choice.
I wonder, and this is just you're a movie maker, you're a filmmaker, so I'm asking you this question. I wonder if there's just such a pressure to get the ball rolling quickly in these kind of movies.
Of course.
You have to give us a killing, because remember, so like you actually don't like the actual deaths in this movie don't start going until about a half hour in, like 40, 30, 35 minutes. It's a 90-minute movie. It's a very breezy movie, by the way. This is not like a long movie. But the actual killings don't start till about 35 minutes in. So you get that first kill early on, and then you get 35 minutes of story, stage setting, character development, and then you get back to the killing again. I can't help but wonder if somewhere someone's like, we got to get it cold open with a kill, because otherwise, while the sister dying in the quarry, it's an accident. She doesn't get murdered by Frendo. She falls and cracks her head open. You can't help but wonder if there was some studio person who was like, we got to have a kill early on. And so I wonder if that's why they made that choice. Because you go from that killing 35 minutes until you get to another kill, and it's a slasher. You got to get the ball rolling. So I wonder, as a filmmaker, I'm not explaining it away, but I think we might be on the right track.
I would say this. I'll resurrect the Rewrite of the Living Dead for this. Here's what I would have done. I would have set this quarry swimming situation at night. I would have had kids around the campfire telling a scary story. In fact, I'd probably have Cole doing it. And his sister's listening, and she's like, come on, Cole, that's bullshit. And then out of the darkness comes Frendo the clown, scares the shit out of her. She falls into the quarry, and she dies. And then, they run to go save her and all that stuff, and the mask comes off, and it's one of the other kids, or it's Cole, or however you want to play that. Like, you can connect all this in a way. They open on a tragedy instead of opening on a straight-up kill. That was a choice. You make choices. They made a choice. In my opinion, it would that backstory would have been stronger to this entire story. It'd be like, I get it now. I can't even say, oh, but people would have seen it coming. I saw everything coming. There's nothing surprising about this movie. That's another one of my issues with this movie. There's no surprises. Everything lays out the way I thought it would. But I think making that choice to make the cold open just a standard slasher opener, it keeps butts in seats, sure, but story-wise, there'd be a lot more satisfaction on the back end. That's me.
Yeah. And I think, as I said, I don't really think there is, in my opinion, there's not really meant to be a big surprise. They kind of ruined it by not revealing the one teacher in the opening kill scene in the cornfield. Because, like I said, for me, I mean, yes, I knew the story going in, but I wasn't looking for the big surprise. The surprise was there's 20 Frendos, because you don't know at the beginning, as there's one Frendo is all you think. And as you said, is it supernatural? I mean, I think they established pretty early on it's not, because they're carrying crossbows and shit. But the idea that there's more than one was the surprise, and the other big surprise is Arthur Hill. The delay in revealing that didn't make a lot of sense to me, because the kids realize in the book, like, oh shit, these are the adults trying to come after us.
Right. Then they have something to figure out. And make sense of.
Yeah. And at that point, it's more of like, who's all involved? Like, because we know it's the adults. Like, how deep does this fucking go? So when the sheriff pulls up in the car, in the book, same kind of thing. Like, they're like, Sheriff, there's people out here killing us. They don't know he's involved. He doesn't show up in a Frendo costume. He shows up as the sheriff. They're like, Sheriff, and he's like, you kids are fucking up again, trying to film your stupid videos, trying to make, fuck all y'all. And he arrests Cole and says, you're coming with me, kid. And they're like, what the fuck? They don't know that he's involved. That's the other kind of twist, would be the sheriff.
Sure.
Also being
and it was
involved.
A good misdirection, because you see him in regular clothing, in his cop clothing, and you're like, oh, okay, so I guess he's not one of those 21 clowns out there, because they're out there and he's right here in his car, so he couldn't be him. But it's a coordinated attack, so it is. It's part of it. Is he can't look like a clown in that moment.
Yeah. So that's the twist, and like that would have been fine, and the Arthur Hill thing would have been fine, and the 20 Frendos would have been fine. But like the idea that we didn't know it was the adults, I'm like, it didn't. That I don't know why that was important to keep that a mystery, because I knew it even without knowing the book. I would have known that. So yeah, but I think the idea of culling these kids out of the town, as wild as that may seem, I just think at the root of it all, this was just a town at its breaking point, and they're just like, you fucked up everything, you've ruined our source of income. And I know we're going to have this subject again with the book thing, but like the idea of it happening year over year over year, years early or whatever, that's not in the book, by the way. That's not part of the book. this is just like the culmination of these adults being like, you know what, we're fucking sick and tired of you kids fucking up our town, and now we've lost our only source of income. Our factory's gone. We're all fucking down in the dumps, depressed, broke, and you kids are still fucking laughing and mocking and making videos and fucking up our town. We're just gonna get rid of you. And I think that in the heart of it all makes a lot of sense. I didn't really need the this has happened 10 times throughout history kind of thing. Yeah. I think if you just reach the boiling point of like, you know what? We've tried, man. We've tried. Like in the 90s, we tried when you were in the grunge shit. We tried in the 2000s when you're in this shit. Now you burnt down our factory, and now you're just a bunch of fuck ups. We're done with you, and we're just going to call the entire root of you all, and you're going to go away. I think that boils it down to simplicity, and I think that was perfectly fine for me.
It would have been nice to not have the generational killings, because it teetered on mysticism. Like it was almost like we have to do this every few years. I was like, nah, you're confusing me yet again. And then not enough emphasis on the town being down on its luck. It really wasn't. I mean, most of the movies focused on the kids, almost all of it. And then there is the B story of Quinn and her dad. You know, like there's that too. You know, he's kind of worried about her. So those are the real focuses of the movie. If you were able to really, I think maybe in the establishing first 15, 20 minutes, show how much damage losing the factory did to the town. It's alluded to, but you don't feel it. You know, the sheriff's like happy-go-lucky. Like when you meet him, he's happy-go-lucky. He's happy to do it. We got the best cheese taters in town. Da-da-da-da. You know, like you don't feel that the town is downtrodden. You get spoken to about it. And I think you could have shown it better instead of just going, well, we'll drop these little lines of dialogue in and that should cover it. And I was like, I don't think it did.
I disagree, because right away when the sheriff shows up in the diner when Quinn and her dad are having dinner, and the sheriff's like very, as you said, very happy-go-lucky. Welcome to town, Doc. Nice to meet you. How are you, sweetheart, kiddo? He kind of placates to the daughter. And then he sees Cole and his friends outside, and the sheriff immediately switches. He's like, more or less,
sure,
for lack of a better word, he's like, fuck them kids. That's basically what he says. So you feel the tension. Like you do feel it. Even when the waitress comes up to wait on her.
Yeah,
Quinn
she doesn't even like Quinn. She's just like, oh, you're a teenager, I hate you.
Yeah, she's like shitty towards her right away. And you just feel like, I almost feel like they do a good job in this movie of giving you the underlying tension of these adults really do not like these kids.
That's very clear. That's clear to me. But it's not clear to me. It's not clear to me that the adults are suffering. Well, it's not clear in the movie. I think it's clear that they hate the teenagers, but they're not suffering because of what happened they're not showing that on screen.
Well, and also you got, while the suffering is part of it, it's also just I think more than anything, it's the ideology of it all. It's not just that they burned down the factory. It's that these kids, this new generation of kids, are fucking up our perfect little small town. Now, the factory is a big part of that, burning down the factory and ruining half the town's source of income. But it's also just the attitude. And I think this is, like, we dealt with this growing up. I'm sure, like, when we, we got, we were the grunge kids, or you got the goth kids, and you're like, what are you doing? Painting your nails, or, dyeing your hair dark, or getting tattoos. Like, I remember when I got my first I think it's that. So it's not just as deep as the factory and the town is now downtrodden. That is part of it. But it's also just the general feeling of, you kids are fucking up, and we're done with you. We're done with you fucking up our perfect little Mayberry town. And it's
the second half of that, though, Damon. The second half of that is not presented. I will argue that. The first part is, we're done with you kids. We hate you. You're stupid. Like, it's so established. It's so easy to see in this movie. The other part is, you're fucking up our town. That, I argue, is not in this movie. The one moment where they have it is the parade. They just fuck up the parade. That's it. Like, they were doing a goof and they fucked the parade up. It didn't like fucking a parade up doesn't fuck my day up at all. But if your antics caused the thing to burn down, and I lost my job, and now I'm down on my luck and I'm drunk on the corner every day when I used to have a job, that's different. That's like a thing that I just think they didn't establish that at that particular part of it properly.
And I'll say this one last thing before we get to categories. I want you to rewatch it because I felt like they did have those moments. They're fleeting. They're not battering you over the head with it, which I kind of enjoy because I feel like some movies do that too much where they're like, oh, by the way, we're really downtrodden and we're fucked up. I think you got, like, as I mentioned, like with the waitress, and then there, even that moment with Rust where he's crossing the street and he's like, yeah, my dad's out of work because the factory burned down. And so now I killed the deer. So that's going to be enough food for my family for a week. So you're even getting it from the kid who's like, my dad's out of work. There's just repeated little inklings there. Like, and Cole, who is supposed to be, as you said, the town heir, he's the heir to the Hill family fortune. No one likes him because they all believed he burned down the factory. And so you see this underlying tension between every adult in town towards Cole Hill. They're like, fuck this kid. And so I think it's almost like when you watch it a second time, and again, I was seeing this because I've read the book, so I knew the underlying cynicism. But rewatch the movie and just look at the characters when you're seeing them surround and like the surrounding characters. They all have this, just they're giving Cole the stink eye from minute one in this movie.
Oh, it's very clear.
Yeah, and I think
it isn't clear why they need to kill him. I think that's what's not clear. It's like, when I look back, I'll piece all that together. Like, it doesn't come. I didn't see it, at least in this viewing, that the evidence was there to be like, yeah, we definitely need to do this.
And I totally disagree based solely upon when he talks about the factory. When he talks about the factory and he's like, they believed I burned it down. I didn't, but they believe I did. That to me is right there. That's the incident. Now you know why they're giving him the stink eye, why they all hate him, because they believe he burned down the factory. To me, that was everything we needed. So,
yeah, they talked it. They didn't show it.
And again, you don't really need to show it in that instance. I mean, you could show the factory burning down. I don't really know how that.
I'm just a proponent of show it, don't say it. Like when you have the chance, like, and this is not that complicated of a show. It's not that hard to do.
I think the quarry scene would have done better, but I don't think the factory scene really mattered. I think when you hear the story,
I wouldn't show burning down the factory. I would show how that affected the town. Like to me, it's not strong. It's just like fuck those kids.
And I disagree. And also because this is a very lean slasher, a 90-minute slasher, we complain all the time about movies who just were like, why did you need an extra 20 minutes of this? I feel like if you put in 10, 15 minutes of this really strong condemnation of these children by the adults, you're battering it over the head. You're like, can we just get to the fucking slashing already? Because that would take us to like the 45-minute mark before we get to the killing.
I'd argue this just needed a scene. And I think it never had a definitive scene. What it did is it, in place of those scenes, it chose dialogue. And I was like, there's a scene. It could have made it all come together. And maybe I missed the scene. Maybe the scene isn't really there. We haven't brought it up. You haven't brought up the scene that I go, oh yeah, there's the scene that shows the pain the town's going through that they need to re-inflict on the kids. I didn't see that scene. And it could have just been one scene. And that doesn't add 10 or 15 minutes. That adds like 30 seconds. That's all I'm saying.
And I think there was that scene. You had the teacher scene where the teacher's very clearly upset with the kids. You had the sheriff scene where the sheriff's clearly upset with the kids. I think you do it too much.
But it's just sort of those dang kids. It's really like Scooby-Doo kind of like, it's not like, it doesn't have like an overarching thing. Like the kids were just being assholes, and really the teacher just felt like an asshole in that moment. He was like giving her detention. She didn't even do anything, and I was like, oh, that's weird. Like he's just being an asshole to her, and you there was not even any context for it.
Well, it's also because you realize in that moment the teacher, like you see how much the teacher hates the children in his own class, and he's just like, I don't care whether you were here minute one or day one. Fuck you. You're going to detention too. You just see the underlying tension that's there, and I think that's really all you need to see. And like I said, this movie doesn't need to go any deeper than that. I think the heart of it all is these kids are fucking up, the adults are sick of it, and their solution is to just wipe them the fuck out. And that's really what it boils down to. So yeah, for me it worked perfectly. Patrick, let's get into some categories and let's kick things off as we do each and every week on the show, and let's talk about best performance. This is a ensemble piece. There are some leads in here, but definitely an ensemble piece. So when it comes to best performance, who gets your award for Clown in a Cornfield?
My best performance goes to Aaron Abrams, who plays Dr. Waybrook, who is Quinn's dad.
Maybrook.
Maybrook. Oh, I wrote Waybrook on my thing. Yeah, so Dr. Maybrook, he's the dad of Quinn. And what I liked is that he was at least how this character was drawn in this movie was he was not an overreactive stereotypical dad. He was actually incredibly patient with Quinn, and all they do is in the first 20 minutes of this movie is establish that Quinn makes terrible choices, like just she's doing typical teen stuff, but like on a double or triple level. It's just like, wow, that's really stupid that you just did that. Wow, that's stupid again, and then you're going to double down on being stupid. And every time he meets her, he's disappointed, he's angry, and she needs to pay whatever consequences it for. But he's really trying desperately to be as fair as he possibly can be, knowing the situation, knowing that he moved her out of Philly, because he couldn't handle it there. So he's bringing her here. He was trying everything he could to be as fair as he could. And I thought Aaron Abrams played that well. Like he's also just a good performer, like a good actor in general. But I liked the crafting of that character, and I liked the way that Aaron Abrams was able to display it.
One of my favorite parts of the book and the movie is the relationship between Quinn and her dad. Like, yes, there's tension there because she's a teenager. You're not going to just get along with your parents. You never do. And yes, she sneaks out and she's doing all things, but his understanding of that makes him more of a modern parent. Like, he's not the parent who's going to like lock the door and throw away the key and you can't go out for 3 weeks now because you know they're going to sneak out. Like, just give up. Like, just know they're going to sneak out. It's just like, it's like telling your kids don't ever drink. All right, we know you're going to drink. It's the parent who's like, I'd rather you not drink, but if you're going to drink, be responsible. Don't drive. Call me if you need a ride. I'm not saying you should let your kids go crazy.
Sure. No,
whatever. He's that kind of parent. He's like, I know you're going to fuck up, but at least let me know when you're fucking up so I can help you. And that's kind of the dad he is. And I kind of appreciate he's a modern dad. He's not, and they didn't make him, while every other adult in this town is very much like, fuck them kids. He's very much like, I love my daughter. I know you're going to fuck up, but I just don't want you to ruin your life fucking up. And I kind of appreciated that character. And he really did come to life in the film that way. For me, my best performance, and I know I'm being that guy when I say I don't want to be the adaptation guy. You can't compare the book to the movie. You got to judge it on its own. But the one character in this movie that came to life so perfectly from the book version, I was like, my God, they got this right, was Carson McCormick playing Cole Hill. Cole is the most popular kid in school. Not only because he's the richest kid in school, but he's also like he's the I can't remember in the book. I don't think he is, but he's the quarterback of the football team. He's not.
Sure.
He's just, but he's like the most. We all had this. The most popular kid in school, homecoming king, whatever. He had that charisma to him and that friendliness to him, to where you're like, I see why people like this kid. But he's also. You hear these stories about the quarry, you hear the story about the factory, and you kind of understand why the adults are like, fuck this guy. And so it's a weird dichotomy with him. And I thought that Carson McCormick did it beautifully because he's likable, but he also seems capable of fucking things up. And I kind of appreciated that they really displayed that in the character. And I thought his portrayal of Cole Hill was pretty perfect because in a character like that, you don't want, he's fucking up, so you don't want the audience to hate him, because then you're like, yeah, Frendo, kill this guy. He's a fucking idiot. But on the flip side, you don't want him to be so lovable and likable. Like, why would other people hang out? You got to have a certain kind of, almost like a little bit of asshole charisma to him. And I think he did that really, really well. And I really liked his portrayal of Cole Hill. He brought it to life. Like, when I saw this movie, out of all the characters, I was like, he nailed it. He read the book, he knew the character, he knew the script, and he nailed Cole Hill.
He struck a really good balance, like 100%, a good balance. He was very charming, very charismatic. I thought overall, like, the character itself was kind of empty, but it was clear. It was like, oh, well, he's getting by on like how just how kind of quick he is, how charismatic, quick, and handsome he is, and he works a crowd really well. But like overall, he's pretty empty-headed at 17-year-old. Like nothing about him seemed that deep. But then he's the mischievous side of him, like him and his little gang of influencers. Like yeah, they still their goal is still to make these incredible horror shorts that they put up on their YouTube page with all their subscribers. So he's still mischievous, but also very charismatic. Like he can turn it on when he needs to.
Yeah. Let's talk about MVP. Our Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP award, named after great character actor Ken Foray, who once upon a time jumped down a flight of stairs and into a basement to kill a creature wearing nothing more than a thong bikini. If that's not an MVP performance, I don't know what is. So, Patrick, when it comes to Clown in a Cornfield, who gets your MVP?
My MVP goes to Katie Douglas, who is our main character. She plays Quinn. I felt Quinn was the great fulcrum of the movie. I think the movie had to balance completely on her, and really everything kind of orbits around her, right? You're living in her perspective. You kind of feel what's going on with her and her dad, and you also, feel her fish out of the water story with these new kids in town who are kind of causing a lot of mayhem, but she can kind of hold her own because she's a big city kind of savvy young woman, so she knows how to kind of hold her own. She's a little bit tough. And I thought, in the moments that were almost slapsticky, for the most part, she was the most balanced one of all. Like some of the other ones, they'd give them like a pretty ridiculous line or something like that, and she would kind of come back and like bring everybody back down to earth. She had a few of those lines too, though. They gave them to everybody. Everybody had their chance to be a little bit more goofy or ham-fisted with the comedy. But I thought she was the perfect, again, best way I can describe it is a fulcrum. Like everything rested on her, and this movie worked really well revolving around her.
I really liked Katie Douglas's performance. I thought she did a great job, which, by the way, she plays a 17-year-old in reality. Katie Douglas is like 26. Once again, actors who could pull off playing younger kids is always amazing, and she does it really well, because I was like, she actually looks like a teenager. Then I looked her up, I was like, oh, she's 26. Holy shit. She does a really good job. If you want to get to my heart of one of my biggest criticisms of this movie, which I don't have too many, but one of them I would say is that in the book, different than the movie, is that Quinn's a little bit more of a badass in the book. Like she kind of takes charge, and she's a little bit more of a badass, and they cut out parts of that. And I understood why they did it, because you can't make a 2.5, 3-hour movie based on the book, and books are always going to be more detailed. And while they did do a good job of her evolution of a character, of her kind of going from like the big city kid to a fish out of water and then stepping up to save her friends, I didn't quite get that full-on badass attitude till the very end of the movie, and she does pull it off then, but it just felt like the transition was a little earlier in the book. Like she kind of like because the cornfield scene is a lot longer in the book. Like that lasts for that's a huge chunk of the book. It doesn't last nearly as long in the movie, and she kind of turns into a badass by necessity, not because she actually is just almost like, I have to do this. I thought they could have pulled that off a little bit earlier, but she does. She still transforms into that character at the end, and I did like her performance as well. To absolutely no one's surprise, my MVP for this movie is none other than author Adam Caesar, because without Adam Caesar, we do not get this world. You do not get the sequel, Frendo Lives, and you do not get the third book, The Church of Frendo. I love these books passionately. This is my favorite book series, and I love everything Adam Caesar's written. He's written a lot of things. He wrote a book called Influencer that came out more recently that's great. He wrote a book called Mercy House, which is great. I read tons of his books. He's an incredible author, and I'm a massive fan. But I love that he crafted a book series that spoke to me as my 80s kid loving slasher movies. And as you said, this is much deeper than the typical 80s slasher. This goes much deeper than like Friday the 13th or My Bloody Valentine or movies like that. This actually has more of a plot than those movies do. But I loved it, and I loved the continuation. I love the characters, because Quinn Maybrook is the lead character in the book series. And at one point I was like, man, someone really needs to make a t-shirt that says Quinn Maybrook is my final girl, because that's how badass I love that character. Like, she is my Nancy Thompson, my Sidney Prescott, and that's all due to Adam Caesar. And he gets it. He wrote really easy to read, compelling novels, and there is a fear when you make an adaptation. And as I said in the Until Dawn podcast, you can't judge it just because you love something so much. You could hope it's done well, but you can't say that you hate it simply because it didn't live up to your expectations as a book reader. While there are differences, and we'll get to that in a second, this was a pretty faithful adaptation. And I love that, and I love the world that Adam Caesar created, and I love that it got adapted into a movie, and I love that hopefully this movie does well, and we're going to get sequels because there's a lot more story to tell when it comes to Quinn Maybrook and the legend of Frendo. So Adam Caesar, he followed me on TikTok a while back, and I felt like a rock star. I was like, oh my God, my favorite author followed me on TikTok. I was so excited. I love the dude. I love everything he writes, and I'm so happy he created this world of Clown in the Cornfield.
I know nothing about his book world. I know nothing about, like this is an adaptation of his work. So I'm just going to ask you this question, Damon. One day you're going to get a chance to talk to this guy, I'm sure of it. Ask him earnestly. Is his last name Adam Cesare and he's just too nice and he just says Caesar because he knows it's easier for people to say Caesar? It's not spelled Caesar at all.
Caesar is not his actual last name. It's his middle name. He changed his name. His last name, he was a teacher, and he changed to become an author. He didn't want parents to pick up his books because they were pretty violent horror novels. To be like, Mr. Miller has a book out where he talks about murdering teenagers, and he's teaching us. So he changed. So Caesar is actually, it is Caesar. That's just his middle name.
Okay. So he spells Caesar weird because I was like, that's not how you spell Caesar, but that's how he spells Caesar. Well, there you go. Clarity cleared.
Clearly, I know way too much. Sorry, Adam, I'm not stalking you. I just know this.
He's like, I'm sorry. How did you know my last name was Miller?
I'm gonna go back to TikTok. I'm gonna go back to TikTok, and it's gonna be blocked on there. Be like, all right, I got a fucking stalker on here. Next category, Patrick. Let's talk about best gore, best kill. Because listen, this is an R-rated slasher. They are not pulling punches here. There are some bloody, murderous kills in this movie. What was your favorite gore/kill in this movie?
Yeah, some pretty good bloody kills in this movie. Not on the level of Until Dawn, but way above Hell of a Summer, which barely had any kills. Had one great kill, and the rest were almost literally off camera. So this one delivers kills.
And Until Dawn is supernatural, so you get a little bit more.
Oh yeah, but I'm just saying the gore and the kills are way over the top. But I think that's what's great about Until Dawn.
Yeah, this is more of a traditional this is human versus human slasher. So.
But the one that I picked felt to me the most inhuman. I'm like, how the fuck does this happen? The character of Janet, one of the high schoolers, gets pitchforked by one of the clowns. But it ain't just any old pitchfork. Like you go, oh, okay, she walks through a door and he pitchforks her torso. No, he pitchforks her and then chucks her into the air, slams her into like a light ballast and like electrocutes her all in one. And I'm like, how he's pitching her like a bunch of hay. Like he lifted her in the air all the way up. I mean, the ceiling was about 8 to 10 feet. So it's not like she just went up a little bit. She went way the fuck up, got smashed into a light ballast and got electrocuted. And I was like, there was quite a few pitchfork kills. I counted at least 3. That was the best one.
Yeah, that was a gnarly one. And yeah, he slams her right into that light fixture and brings her back down. She's got the pitchfork still in her when he lets it go. It's pretty gnarly. There's a couple of choices in here. I actually really liked the switch. The way they killed the sheriff is different, where Quinn electrocutes him with a cattle prod and shoves it down his throat, which I thought was pretty cool, because in the book, she just shoots him with a shotgun and he dies. That was a pretty cool switch. But the one I liked the best, and this is very similar to the book, is when Dr. Maybrook is forced to operate and save one of the Frendos who gets his hand blown off. When Rust shows up with a shotgun, they're like, oh shit, these kids have a gun. And Rust blows off the hand of one of the Frendos. And that's when you totally realize this is not a supernatural, because the Frendo's like, oh fuck! Screams in bloody pain. They take him to the medical clinic and they force Dr. Maybrook to work on the blown away hand of a Frendo. He's trying to get out of there, of course, and so he makes the Frendo, there's another Frendo basically holding him hostage there. And he makes the Frendo, I need saline. I need you to reach for the saline. And when we're losing him, he takes off the monitor, so it goes flatline, which is a real thing. Like when you take off the monitor, that's what will happen. And he's like, you got to do the charge. You got to do the charging pads, the electric pads. He's like, here, do it. And while he's doing it, he grabs the guy's knife and jams it into the Frendo's neck. And the Frendo is like, he's like, now, I just love this when Dr. Mayberg is like, he's like, now, you don't want to pull that out. You don't want to pull that out. And of course the Frendo does, and blood just splurts out and the guy falls over and dies. But it's so funny that he's just like, now hold on. Don't pull that out. You want to hold that in there. You want to hold that in there. Don't do that. And then he does it. And I just love that. Like because Dr. Mayberg is actually in my opinion, the best comic relief of the movie. When he does that, he's like, don't do that. And
then, I think it's like one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah. Pulls it out and there goes the neck.
Damon,
all right.
This next question is truly just for you because I can't answer this question. So I came up with this one, and you have already compared and contrasted the book and the movie a lot. So all I'm asking really is, how did this movie stack up against the book? Like, how do you rate it? Is it a good adaptation of the book? Is it okay? Could they have done better? Could they have made a 2-hour version that you think would have been perfect? Like, what's your thoughts on book versus movie?
Overall, I would say they did a really solid adaptation. I think of Stephen King's The Outsider, and they adapted that into like an 8-episode HBO series. And I think I've said this on the show before. I actually like the HBO series better than the book. I like the book. Don't get me wrong. It's good.
It's a great series, though.
But the series was incredible. And it's because they built upon the mythology in the book. Like, they actually built into more mythology. This one, they have to take out some stuff. As I mentioned, the actual Cornfield slaughter scene in the book, if this was done in a movie, it would have been 45 minutes long. Because it's fucked up. Like, there's a lot more killing. In the book, the kids that are in the barn, they set the fucking barn on fire to kill the children. And so they're like, we got to get out of here. And so then Cole and some of the other kids go into the silo, which is where they actually escape here. But Quinn's not with them. Like, Quinn is trying to get around the other Frendos. And they set the fucking barn on fire to kill all the kids inside. So it's a little more fucked up. And so they get out of the Cornfield part a little quicker. I understand why they do it, because you got to get to the story, and they're trying to make this a lean 90 minutes. And to a certain extent, I agree. I understand that. You don't want to make a 2.5-hour slasher film. It gets a little too much. But overall, the tone, the characters, the story was very much the same, very faithful to the original. Little differences here. Like I said, that we've done this before. It's happened 20 times in the history, or 10 times, or whatever they say in that explanation at the end. That's not really part of the book. Also, Arthur Hill, they never really intimated that he burned down his own corn syrup factory. Like, they're not denying that the kids probably did it. And Arthur Hill, again, the mystery in the book is you don't think Arthur Hill's involved, because he's almost like the Wizard of Oz in the book. Like, you don't really see him. They talk about him a lot, but you don't really see or hear from him. He's kind of secluded since his daughter died, so he's kind of drawn away from the town. He doesn't show up at the Founders Day parade. Like, he's the town oligarch, but he doesn't really associate with the town since his daughter died. And then when you see him at the end, and Cole's like, Dad? And like, oh shit, he's the guy who led this entire slaughter of the children. That's a little different in the book, but overall the tone is the same. And I actually really like Kevin Durant's performance. He's creepy as shit as Arthur Hill in this movie. Overall I thought they did a really good job. There's little minor differences, but nothing that really blew me away. I thought overall, from a massive, massive fan of the book, they did a good job. I thought Katie Douglas brought Quinn Maybrook to life really, really well. I thought, as I mentioned, the kid who played Cole, the kid who played Rust, all those characters were great. I thought, I'm a big Will Sasso fan. I think he's great. I thought he did a pretty good job as like a menacing Sheriff Dunn. In the book, I don't know why, but in my head, the book version was Clancy Brown.
Oh yeah, I could see that.
That, kind of menacing, older,
serious guy. Yeah. Will Sasso, you immediately think of comedy. He's a comedy. Right. Actually, funny enough, I called into a podcast one time and I did about a 15-minute talk with Will Sasso. He was one of the guests, and we were just riffing on egg salad sandwiches. I don't know. It's totally random, but he's a funny guy. And so you see him, and especially even when they introduce him, he's kind of jovial and fun. And you're like, okay, so he's part of the comedy of this movie.
Yeah, but in my head, when I read the books, I kind of pictured him as Clancy Brown. If you know Clancy Brown, of course, from
Yes.
Shawshank Redemption. He's
Awesome.
got. There's some reason I had that in my head, and that's just my own personal thing. But I thought he did a pretty good job. But overall, I thought it was a great adaptation. They didn't mess it up. They didn't change things so dramatically. There are minor differences, but nothing that really messed anything up. So overall, pretty faithful adaptation. I thought Eli Craig and company did a good job. And my only hope, and this is just as a book reader, I hope this does well enough that we do get some sequels, because they actually set it up perfectly. And I'll talk about this towards the end of the podcast, how they set it up for the sequel. I hope they do the sequel, and I hope they do more of these movies, because there's a lot more story to tell when it comes to Clown in the Cornfield.
All right.
Next category, Patrick, can we survive this horror film? Now, are we projecting ourselves to be the adults or the kids in this movie? Because I don't have children, so I can't say that I would be totally like, fuck them kids, but I definitely would not be the adults in this movie.
Well, I thought about this, Damon. What we would be in this movie is not unlike the high schoolers. Imagine it's just still you and me, and we live in this small town, but we have a podcast called Rewind of the Living Dead. We're sort of influencers too, in our own little way. I mean, shit, we're about to start asking people for money for Patreon and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, we're in the business of talking this stuff. I have to imagine that on some level, we would be stoking the flames of our small town a little bit, at least a little bit, and that would probably turn the ire of the cult of clowns against us, because they'd be like, oh, and those fucking podcasters too, they're no help, they're not with us on all this. They think the kids are fine, because I do think the kids are fine, by the way, for truth be told. And so I have a feeling we'd be the target of that group. Would we be taken out by them? I don't know. The kids kind of not kicked their ass, but like the kids did pretty well against them. They were just outnumbered.
Yeah, I think that, and that this is not going back to the book comparison. This is more of just like not a minor complaint. In the book, there's a whole lot of kids who get slaughtered. And I think they probably budgetary wise, like, we don't have the budget to kill 50 kids. We can only kill like 10 kids. So they kind of needled it down. So they did
the line items.
Yeah, the barn burning, like, that's a pretty fucked up scene in the book. Like, they literally set the barn on fire and kids are running out burned on flames and shit. Like, that's pretty dramatic. I think we survived, Patrick, based on one thing, and maybe this is just my hubris and my ego, and ego of me knowing you and you knowing me. When you get into supernatural and or like aliens, we talked about the xenomorphs. Like, we're never going to survive that. Yeah. You just don't survive a xenomorph. No. Probably not. We can talk about will we survive a Jason or a Freddy, but ultimately you're dealing with a supernatural, unkillable killer. These are people. Now, if they got a shotgun pointed at me and they blow my head off, yeah, I'm not making it through that. But they're coming at me with a chainsaw, or outside of maybe getting shot with a crossbow, which again, you can't really avoid that. I think we fucked these people up. Like, I feel like we are 100% going to turn the tables on these fuckers, and they're going to regret coming after David and Patrick. I'm not trying to be egotistical. I'm just saying, like, these are human people. They're in for some fucked up nights going against the two of us.
I mean, they were in for it against just a handful of kids, 20 of them versus a handful of kids, and they didn't win. So yeah, I think we do get out of this alive.
Yeah, and we turn the tables. We'll kill some people. We got.
I'll kill a clown.
I don't know what that says about us, but it says something. Patrick, next category, remake, sequel, or leave it alone. Pretty self-explanatory. This is where we take whatever film we're reviewing and we say, should they remake it, should they sequelize it, or should they leave it alone? I'm going to go first because this is my thing. I've already said it. I'm just going to say it again. There are 2 more books in this series, a third book on the way. The second book is called Frendo Lives. It takes place a year after the first book, and the end of this movie, when Quinn is going off to college, her father's running for mayor, and she's met up by Rust and Cole, who, by the way, spoiler alert, they actually are in love with each other. It's a great little twist in the movie that Quinn has the thing for Cole, and he's like, hold on now, I don't want to go there with you. And she's like, oh, she gets rejected, and she's so sad, and then you realize why. He's actually gay, and he's actually in love with Rust.
Yeah.
I love that little twist. It's in the book, too, but it's a great little twist. Like, yeah, I'm not into you, I'm into him. But she's leaving for college. Quinn or Rust and Cole show up and give her a goodbye, which, by the way, great name, Rust and Cole, by the way, True Detective, we'll nod there.
I like that.
They come to say goodbye and they give her a present. And in the box, she opens it up. It's a collapsible baton. In the second book, when Quinn's at college, she goes to college. She goes back to Philadelphia to go to college. So she returns to her hometown and goes to college up in Pennsylvania. She talks about in the book, in her bag, she always carries a 16-inch collapsible baton. That's her weapon of choice that she carries for her protection, because after having 20 or 30 murderous clowns come after you, you're going to carry something as a weapon. And so she carries that baton. So I'd love to nod in this movie that they gave her the baton, which I don't think that's in the book. I can't remember exactly, but she has it in the second book. So I love that little nod of saying, here's your baton, because that's her weapon in the second movie. And, so my point is, I want a sequel. I want Frendo Lives, which continues this story 1 year later. I'm not going to spoil it because I know you don't want it spoiled, Patrick, but I know what happens, and it's crazy. And if you think the plot of this one is like, fuck them kids, fuck them kids on steroids for part 2. So I want Frendo Lives. I need the second movie. Please, Shudder, all the people out there that made this movie, we need Frendo Lives. So I want Clown in the Cornfield part 2.
Damon, I'm going to be real honest with you. I don't need a sequel. I'm okay. But obviously this movie is ripe for a sequel, and most I would say solid slashers or competent slashers are ripe for sequels, and so this one's no different. Despite the fact that I didn't really like this movie, I still think that, like, at the end of the day, if I could say, yeah, let's get a slasher or a sequel for Until Dawn, there's no reason we can't have a slasher for Clown in the Cornfield.
Yeah. And slashers, as you said, they're just kind of built for that. So you kind of assume.
They're just made for sequels.
And this one has even a better excuse because there already are 2 more books in the series. So you have an easy way in and easy way to do it. Next category, Patrick, favorite horror film clown. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, Adam Caesar, part of the reason he wrote the book was he loved horror film clowns, but he realized there was no clown slasher. A lot of supernatural clowns, Pennywise, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, other movies like that, but no just dyed-in-the-wool slasher featuring a clown killer, which is kind of an interesting twist. But there's plenty of killer clowns in horror. So, Patrick, who is your favorite killer clown from a horror movie?
I'm going to be very specific here. My favorite clown in a horror movie is Pennywise in the first It, starring Bill Skarsgård. It Chapter 2. Okay, it's not terrible. It's not my kind of movie. I'm not really into it. But the original It with Bill Skarsgård, to me, that's a hell of a scary clown. Most of these clowns don't scare me. Art the Clown, who I like very much, doesn't scare me. He's Art the Clown. I actually kind of like him. He's rather charismatic. The Bill Skarsgård Pennywise in that first movie is a scary thing. He's scary. What he does is scary. That, to me, is a great, scary movie. Like, it's unsettling, gets under your skin, kind of creepy. And at the center of it is this clown that I don't want to tussle with. All the rest of them, I'm sort of like, even with Art, where I'm like, I know I'm fucked if I get too close to Art. He doesn't, like, I don't have that feeling of threat and dread when I see him, but I do when I see that Pennywise.
I love that Pennywise. I actually still slightly prefer the Tim Curry Pennywise from the original It. I just love the way he played that character. He's so creepy, and I just love the vernacular he uses in that movie. But that's just a personal preference. I know I'm being prisoner of the moment, and I understand that. But I'm 100%. My new favorite film clown is Frendo the Clown. I've been waiting for this Frendo to show up in movies for years when they said they were adapting this, and now that it's here, I need a Frendo mask. I want one of those little Frendo Bay Pin pop-up dolls. I want it all. So Frendo, I am a friend of Frendo. I want more Frendo. I need more Frendo. Frendo, you are my clown. So be more Clown in the Cornfield. So I am 100% being prisoner of the moment, but Frendo the Clown is my favorite clown.
Good for you, Damon.
Patrick, last category, is it scary? So when it all boils down, and I think we always do judge these films based on what they are, meaning this is a slasher. I guess maybe the better category is it slashy? So is
it friendo-y? Is it slashy? Is it clowny?
Does it work?
It's all those things.
Does it work?
Yeah. It's a standard slasher. You know, like we've talked about two other slashers, or maybe three. I can't remember exactly, but we've talked about a couple of slashers this year. It belongs in the slasher category, and it delivers on what you look for in a slasher movie. It has kind of hapless teens who get in over their head, and they have to fight against a slasher. What type of slasher? Well, that's different depending on the movie. In this case, it's Frendo the Clown. They do their job. People get slashed. I'm going to tell you this right now, though. The only thing I'm requesting for the sequel, gorier, crazier. Like the kills were good. They weren't great. Like, they were just good. And I'm like, okay, good's fine, but let's, we can step it up. And if this movie does well, maybe they will be able to step it up. Because let's be honest, about halfway through the slashing, I was like, well, they ain't got shit on Art the Clown. Now, that's a very high bar in terms, it's extreme gore and violence in an Art the Clown movie, and you're not going to get that in this. I'm not expecting that. But I am like, I want the kills to be more creative, just go a little bit harder, a little bit more over the top, take some creative license, and kill in a more dramatic fashion to take this slasher to the next level.
I would totally agree with you there. I think it could be a little bit gorier, a little bit slashier in that regard. But is it slashy? Is it a slasher film? Yeah. 100%. It's dyed-in-the-wool slasher. This is, if you are a slasher fan, you are probably going to enjoy Clown in the Cornfield. It's not trying to be more than it is. I think it is a little more advanced than just the average 80s slasher. It's not My Bloody Valentine.
Most things are. Most things are.
They're not full on Friday the 13th movies, but it's also not trying to be. It's not a good movie, but we talk about Founders Day. It's tried way too hard. It's not that. This is a very simplistic, works very well slasher, so it works. And if you like slasher movies, if you are like me and you are obsessed with slasher movies, you're probably going to enjoy this movie. Clown in the Cornfield is available right now in theaters. Go check it out. Also, I would highly recommend to read the book series. I love the books. I swear by the books. Check out Adam Caesar's trilogy, and there is a fourth book on the way that I absolutely cannot wait to read. Check those out, and I think you'll enjoy those as well. As always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in the show. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, over on our YouTube channel. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead and find us, like and subscribe to us on YouTube. And you can also find all the podcasts as well as reviews that we don't do on the podcast, trailers, all kinds of cool stuff over on the website, rewindofTheLivingDead.com. That is updated pretty much daily, so check that out as well. You got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review. Tell us your favorite horror movie clown. You can reach us on email, rotlivingdead@gmail.com or rotlivingdead@gmail.com or .com if I could speak. Or find us on social media. As I said, we are on Twitter/X, Facebook, and Instagram. We tend to get the most messages on Instagram, but reach out to us however you like. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead, and you will find us on all of those platforms, and we are very active on all three platforms.
And I'm always answering the YouTube comments, too. If you're doing YouTube comments, I'm the one answering, just so you know.
Yeah, so do that as well. And you can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, to everyone that tunes in. We will see you next week for another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Don't fuck with Frendo. We'll see you then.
Peace.